Okay, so I'm so glad to introduce you my colleague Giovanni Corazza. He started his career in this university, and I had the privilege to share the room with him for 7 years. He also worked in this premises.
The office, we share the office. No other rooms.
The office, the room office. And then he came back to his city, Bologna, where he became associate professor and then full professors. After 2000, he became a reference person for satellite telecommunication in Europe, chairing the ASMS task force and then founding the ISI ATP platform in the frame of H2020 program. And after having given a lot to telecommunications and having received a lot of satisfaction from telecommunication, in the last 5-6 years, he dedicated his efforts to creativity.
It's a parallel thing, yeah.
Parallel, he didn't abandon the telecommunication, but now let's hear from him how ideas are generated in our mind.
That's a good topic. Let me put this a little down because it's a little loud. So good morning, everyone. Thanks, Michele, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and take some of your time to talk about something different. As Michele says, this is not going to be artificial, it's going to be more a human side, but still the artificial side of the technology that we love so much, let's say in a positivistic way, is important to what we're going to discuss. So, first of all, okay, it's a good thing that you're here. I'm glad that you didn't take the chance to go and visit Rome, but still the question is, do we have time for this? Why do we talk about creativity at all? Our schedule is normally driven by fires. We have to extinguish fires. Something is urgent, and we have to do it by tomorrow. We have to do it by yesterday. So typically, the feeling is that I don't have time. But this is a conference for research, so typically research should have time. But think of how do you win a tender? Suppose there's a European Space Agency tender or any other kind of tender. How do you win? What is wanted from a winning proposal in telecommunications or satellite communications? Well, first of all, you have to show that you know exactly what is going on, so state of the art, and the future trends. So you have to prove your reputation, maybe by your score. And of course, you have to make a proposal which is very clear, good topics, good goals, and the proposal becomes stronger and stronger if it more or less outlines what you will achieve and what are the risks of not achieving the goals, so that there is a strategy, for risk mitigation. Schedules are always tight. When I say 1 year, 1 year and a half to achieve results. What is the end result? That these R&D efforts must be incremental. They must be incremental. You already know the result before you start the research. So this is all important. I'm not saying that R&D done in this way is not necessary. It's absolutely necessary. But the question is this enough? Or do we need to add something which goes beyond or outside the simple extension of the trends? Because otherwise, if you're always increasing the return of your investment, what you're doing is that you're digging deeper and deeper, going further and further down, but then sometimes you need to go back up to the surface and look for new avenues and look for new paths. So what we're talking about in this 45 minutes is what should you do to go back up to the surface and try to look for something that nobody else is looking at, outside of the trends. And we're not talking about this kind of activity. We're not talking about climbing a mountain, because in this case, it's very clear, even though you have different alternative routes, and you may have competition, maybe somebody will get to the top of the network coding family first. It's very clear who will win, the one that gets to the top. It's very clear. Problem solving, very clear. What we're talking about here in this very short time in which you still have to look at your phone and maybe check your email, at the same time you feel this urge, because even 40 minutes is a large investment. What we're talking about in these few minutes is climbing a tree, where there are a million alternatives, and nobody can say a priori what is the best. Nobody can say where you can find the sweetest fruit. You have to try, you have to explore, you have to experience the frustration of not finding what you're looking for. And even when you do find it, people will say, no, we've done it before. It doesn't work. Or if it does work, yes, it's obvious a posteriori. So it's a different kind of game. And what I want to convince you that, whoops, something happened there. Inside the evolution of society, which is the title of this talk, this kind of activity in which we explore multiple alternatives has an important role. So let's see where we come from. We come from the industrial society. What does that mean? Two things. Standard products. To build products that cost little, you need to have standardization. Telecommunication is born and lives with standards. And we concentrate resources and we synchronize our lives. So we do the same thing at the same time. We create traffic jams in the morning and in the evening. We synchronize what we see on TV. And we massify taste. We all like the same things, because otherwise that large production doesn't go anywhere. So you need advertisement to convince everyone to buy the same things. If that is society, what should you teach? What should the study course at the University of Rome Tor Vergata look like? Well, first of all, if it's standards that are important, expertise and know-how in those standards, that's fundamental. That's the top of your CV. What is your experience? What is your know-how? And maybe you get more and more specialized into a very narrow field, because in that way you can really become the expert. Only a few of us do not conform to these standards, and a very small subset of those who do not conform, they generate ideas, works that make a difference in science, art, technology. We call them geniuses. They are outliers. Geniuses are outliers. So that's where we come from. But now technology and the ISNCC conference tells us that is changing the world. Actually, it's a revolution. Because you take those two trends and you flip them upside down. Instead of standardization, we have personalization, user profiling. You don't sell anything anymore if it's not user-driven. If you don't give the illusion, because sometimes it's an illusion, that the product has been customized. And when you now go on the internet, you choose what to watch or what you listen to. And you might also upload your content, so you are not only a consumer, you're also a producer, the individual, instead of the massification of the industrial society. And thanks to our technologies, yes, you are here, but you're also somewhere else. You're chatting, exchanging email, no matter what the physical space is, no matter what the time zone is. We live together, work together, interact, exchange, reason, take responsibilities, make decisions as a network of people and machines. In such a society, what should you teach? Well, expertise is still enough. But if you have access at all time to all information in the world, because all of the knowledge is on the internet. All of the knowledge of the world is on the internet. It's not true. University of Bologna, we're starting new study courses on archaeology of knowledge outside of the internet. It's a joke. The trend is clear. Everything will be on the internet, and everyone who has access to the network, all the distributed databases, has access to all the facts, all of the papers, all of the reports, all of the patents. So you still need expertise. I'm not saying that you don't need it anymore, but for a different purpose, not to show it on your CV, but to filter this flow of information that comes to you, which is too much. It's impossible to filter information if you don't have knowledge. So that's the first thing we need to teach. Second thing is, if you have access to all this information, flexibility, the ability of our mind to change category, to change frame of mind, to work in different disciplines, as we're talking about today, that becomes an essential asset. You will never do the same thing for all of your life. That would be crazy in a society where you have access to all knowledge of the world. So now you gain information with videos, you gain information with clips, and you can do things that you were not able to do in the past. Now, if all of us have access to all knowledge, and any knowledge gaps now can be filled in minutes. It used to take years. Knowledge gaps between people, knowledge gaps between companies, now are, filled in no time. On any topic that you want, you can download information in a matter of minutes. What makes a difference now between companies? What makes a difference between people? And in the end, the difference that it makes between people means what is our distinction and therefore our dignity as human beings. If we all know the same things, the dignity now is related to what you do with that information. How you use that common shared layer of information to do what? To generate ideas which are original. Now creativity becomes a necessity for everyone as a form of dignity. Because that's the only information that will not be on the network. The one that has been generated now. Okay, but there's a third box. That's not the end of the story. Just to say that if creativity now is a democratic necessity, it needs to become a discipline. So you need to extract principles, you need to teach it and develop it and not leave it to natural talent. Of course there is talent, because talent is there like for any other discipline. In any discipline you have talented people, but as for any other discipline, creativity can become a science, and that is what we're working on. As I said, this is not the end of the story because we have to look into the future. The future is what we're talking about, of course, hyper levels of intelligence, hyper levels of connectivity. Like Franco is working on the Internet of Things, so he's working to interconnect everything. Everything will be interconnected, and as we know, in 15 years, this machine will have the computing power of the human brain, same cost, 1,000 euros more or less. And in, let's say, 35 years, 2050, more or less, same machine, same price, computing power of the human species. You add a little bit of artificial intelligence, and every one of us has one of these machines. We understand that it's a new form of society with new possibilities, anthropomorphic and non-anthropomorphic forms of distributed intelligence, which go for much beyond what we have today. So what do we teach to younger generations which will live in this world? If we keep teaching the same things, same study courses, same degrees, and the world is changing at the same time, we might be granting degrees that will have very little use. We should be concerned about that. So the first thing to teach is how to generate a collaboration between the artificial and the biological brains. Because we know already that better than the single isolated biological brains, which is never isolated because it's always social, and better than the single computer, the collaboration between the two is much, much stronger. We know that. So how do you create that collaboration, and for what? What is the role of the human side in this collaboration? Of course, I'm not against digital skills. I'm an engineer. I'm responsible for a supercomputing enterprise. I would be crazy to say that digital skills are not important. So I'm not going to say that. But what will make a difference for us as biological beings will not be our capacity to program our digital skills, but what computers still cannot do, which is the human side. So our ability to imagine, our ability to understand, our ability to imply and infer, our ability to generate a novelty, in one word, our creativity. So what do we do with that creativity in this collaboration between the computer and the machine? We generate ideas. Everyone has access to this artificial labor, which does not strike. There's no complaining from the robots. And we launch enterprises. So the tendency is that we all become entrepreneurs with larger and larger responsibilities, with business models that will not last for months as they do today, but the duration of a business model will be reduced to weeks, which means we all become serial entrepreneurs. We generate ideas and we let the computers, the anthropomorphic or non-anthropomorphic form of intelligence, carry them out at very low cost and very effectively. If this scenario, which might be a little unsettling, I understand, is true, then creativity is not a matter of dignity anymore, but mere survival. That's what we do. That is our role. Unless you believe in the universal salary, of course, that's being talked about also in Italy these days, unless you believe that we will live a life with no work, no jobs, and the machines will do everything and we will be happy like that, which is not possible in my view, we still will have a role, and that role will be very much related to creativity, essentially related to that. You say, okay, Giovanni, 2050 is far, who knows? You don't have the crystal ball. So, okay, so let's talk about today, 2018. Okay, forget about 2050. This is one of the reports, of the many reports from the World Economic Forum, Geneva, every year. Reskilling revolution. We need a large-scale job transition plan to reskill our population to become creative, curious, agile, lifelong learners, comfortable with continuous change. This is our analysis today, not in 35 years. This is what we need to transform our skills to become more creative. Okay, you're still not convinced because you're very skeptical, and that's important, so you don't believe me. We take another report. This one comes from the UK. It's called Creativity versus Robots. And inside this report, you find matrices like this. On the abscissa, you have the probability of computerization. That means the probability that your work will be given to a machine. As simple as that. The machine will carry out the work that you do. What is the probability? And in the ordinate, you have the probability that in your job, you use your creative abilities. Creativity traits, abilities, skills, environment. There's a social element. There's an individual element. And then when you cross the two probabilities, you have these squares, red. The more red it is, the larger the number of millions of jobs which are transferred from the human side to the artificial side. And it's clear. The message is very clear. The lower the creativity, the larger the probability of a computerization. Today, not tomorrow, not in 15 years, not in 20 years. So if you don't listen to me anymore, and you're bored already and you want to leave, there's only one message that I wish you to carry home. Creativity is not a luxury. It's a necessity for the survival of our species. We are building the machines. Of course, we are the ones. And at the same time, we are producing this effect. So we believe so much that creativity is a necessity for our survival that we founded an institute. It's called Marconi Institute for Creativity in the name of Guglielmo Marconi, our hero from Bologna, inventor of non-line of sight radio systems, if you want, because line of sight was already there, but he was the first to cross the hills. The hill, Celestini Hill, is on the other side of that villa that you see there. And underneath you have this tomb over there. We have 3 pillars. Scientific research, because there is scientific literature dedicated to creativity, about 120 years of journals, books on that. I'm not going to talk about our scientific results because that would take it too far from this conference. But just to say that what I'm going to talk about is based on results which have, statistical validity. So experiments done with humans with statistical validity. So what I'm going to talk about is as a scientific basis. Education, so we have courses on creativity and innovation at the university level, business schools, and we do a little bit at elementary, primary, and secondary schools. We don't do much because there's not much time available, but we've done one in an elementary school in Rome also last year. And finally, application. So you go to companies, set out a meeting, 12 people around the table, use the methodologies that come out of the principles that describe the creative thinking process, generate ideas. Typical results is that the rate of generation, the throughput, and the delay in generation of ideas is about 100 ideas per hour. That's a typical rate, out of which 90% are trashed. It's a large exploration of alternatives. So out of these 10%, typically 1 or 2% become invention disclosures or patents. So that is the kind of typical result that you get when you apply then the techniques within a company. So you take a product portfolio or service portfolio of a company, you understand what are the trends, what are the dominant ideas, what are the requirements, what are the performance targets, and you start challenging in different ways. You start challenging that reality in different ways, going outside of the trends, not within the trends. It's not incremental R&D. That's not what we're talking about here, okay? That takes large investments. That takes large teams. That takes a long time. Here we're talking about generation of ideas that go outside and beyond those limits, and this can be done in a 2-hour session. Then, of course, those few ideas that you retain, that will take 6 months, 1 year of investment to develop before you actually say, yes, this works. But the generation of the idea itself is within that kind of a time limit. Talking about time limits, let me check where I am. So in the end, it's not the end of my presentation, but the end of this first discussion, it's a matter of finding the right balance. I'm not saying that milking the cow is not important. Of course it is. That's where the profits come in. I'm not saying that traditional research and development is not good, essential, but you need to leave space for something more, which then will make the difference. That's where the difference will come from. And it's enough if you reserve a very small, negligible percentage of the resources of your company, of your own time, to this kind of activity. So I'm saying 1% to 5%, 5% of your week means half an hour. So if you dedicate half an hour per week to this kind of activity, that's plenty. It's great. When was the last time that you challenged what you do, or you challenged the way you think, or you challenged the topics you're working on in your R&D environment? Okay, so that's the end of the introduction, if you want. I should have, hopefully, convinced you that what we're talking about here is not just, okay, so Michele wanted to relax us for 45 minutes. Let's talk about creativity and who cares. No, it's something which is a problem for all of us. And especially, this message should go outside of these 4 walls. And especially I'm thinking of the younger generations, of course. Because for them, what I said is even more true. So, young children, younger generations, that's very important. So let's move on a little bit. And let me ask you, who slept well last night? Did you sleep well? So half, or a little half. Then. So if you did not sleep well and maybe you woke up, this is because when you rest, you go to rest, Actually, there's some part of the brain that wakes up. This is called the default mode network. It's called default because that's exactly what it does. When you turn off yourself, you think you do, something else comes up. The default mode network is a large-scale network that involves both hemispheres and structures in the brain which are very far. This is why we call it large-scale. And the connectivity of the default mode network, which means the flow of information between these very far away structures in the brain, is related to our imagination performance. Our performance in imagination is related to characteristics of the default mode network. Mind-wandering, imagination, is all related to the performance of this. If this works too much, then you wake up at 9 and there's a voice that comes and wakes you up because you're thinking. And maybe you find a solution to a problem that you had before you went to sleep. That's still the default mode network working. Now, second question is a little more dramatic. What would happen if an iron bar went through your skull, behind your left eye, and came out of there? Because there's an explosion, you're building a railway, there's an explosion, and this iron bar, cuts your head, in a sense. You would think that probably you would die, right? Well, it's very likely that you would die, but Phineas Cage did not die. He actually had this experience. He was building this railway. Middle of the 19th century, in the start of the industrial society, we're building the infrastructures for transport. Explosion. Bar goes through his head, loses one eye, of course, but he does not die. Actually, the bar is removed from his head. He stands up and walks home. Has a little infection for a couple of days, risks of dying, but then in the end he does not. So he keeps on living a normal life. Normal? No. His personality changed. He was not able to have social relationships anymore. He was not able to inhibit instinctive behavior. And that's because he had affected with that incident another network, another large-scale network, which is called executive control network, which is in charge of metacognition, control of our thinking process, inhibition. Now, as I will say later, inhibition is fundamental to creative thinking. The fact that you are able to willingly or subconsciously block certain avenues of thinking is fundamental in finding alternatives. Otherwise, you will always conform to the norm. So what we have found now, not us, this is a very recent work and 2015 work, many evidences now coming from different parts of the world, is that creative cognition is related to a collaboration between these two large-scale networks. The default mode network opening up imagination, and the executive control network controlling the process and filtering and inhibiting certain parts. So that's where, from the single individual point of view, we attribute our creative performance to. But then, of course, there are social elements, and the talk will be much longer, much more complex. I will stop there in terms of mechanisms and ask you a third question. Now we say, okay, it's important to challenge state of the art. We are researchers here presenting our research results. So it's our task, it's our job, it's our duty to challenge the state of the art. Why, in the end, is it difficult? Why do we always move just a little bit? And I'm going to use now Cineca, which is this supercomputing facility I was telling you about, to make a point. Let's compare a human brain, average human brain, with the best supercomputer that we have in Europe today, except for Switzerland. So take away Switzerland, but we have the #1 computer. It's in Bologna. It's called Marconi, so we're happy for that name. What is the computing capacity? Marconi, 20 petaflops, so 20 times 10 to the 15th floating point operations per second. The brain, our brain, even today, before lunch, 38 petaflops. Of course, we don't use it all of the time, because otherwise we would be in epileptic crisis all of the time. cannot use it all of the time together. But that means that more or less today, for the technology that we have today, the best supercomputer and one human brain have comparable computing capacity. What is the difference? Well, look at the second line. Look at power consumption. Brain is very green. We talk about green, no? Technology. 15 watts. It's a low-power light bulb. Nothing. Of course, we're very hungry already, but it's 15 watts in the end. Not much. Just a little snack will do. But then go to Casalecchio di Reno, where Cineca is, and half of the energy goes to Cineca, and I cannot tell you the amount of the power bill, but it's very, very large. So we are in the order of millions of euros. Okay, so the difference is that we are power-saving machines. And that is fantastic. Without these power-saving mechanisms, it would be impossible for us to live, but this has consequences. When we learn something, we review something, we perform a certain activity, we get better and better at certain, play an instrument, driving a car, we don't consume energy anymore because the thresholds in the neurons which are involved in the patterns related to that activity become smaller and smaller. The thresholds of the neurons are dynamic, and the more you go through a certain path, the lower they become, and now the water flows very freely with very little energy expenditure at the bottom of the canyon. But as I said, in order to generate something new, you have to go back up and excavate a new canyon. So you need to slow down and spend much more energy than the minimum which is required to survive, apparently. If you can survive in continuity with the state of the art, then you don't need what we're talking about. But if the world is changing beneath your feet and you need to generate something new in order to survive, then this activity of going up, slowing down your thinking process, excavating new canyons becomes necessary. You say, well, okay, how do we do that? Let's take a look at the history, starting from a guy that we like, all of us depend on Heinrich Hertz, in a sense, because he's the one that discovered that electromagnetic waves can propagate, so important. And the fourth question now is, what is in common between Hertz and Van Gogh? And the answer is nothing. Let's go to lunch. Well, first of all, Heinrich Hertz did not see the value of his discovery. No practical applications. Of course, today we're talking about things that are depending on that. So let's say that, of course, it's very difficult to see the value of a new idea. And if you notice, he was born in 1857, died in 94, so he died at 37 years old. And Van Gogh was born in 53, died in 1890, so he died at 37. So the message is that in order to be creative, you have to die at 37. Some of us are passed beyond that. Of course not. That's not what is in common. The thing is, how many paintings, and this is a question for Franco, who just got in, how many paintings did Van Gogh sell in his lifetime? Almost zero, but one, and which was not the best one. So that means no success in the course of his lifetime. Because not only he didn't want success, as he wrote both to Theo and to his mother and sister, he did not look for success at all, but the other people, the judges, the experts, were not able to see the value of that. So what is in common between Hertz and Van Gogh is the difficulty that we have today in assessing the value of an idea which is truly original and which will have an impact in the future. So the game of creativity requires to develop the ability to see the value in something that has never been said before. This is a difficult activity. And it can be trained. Inventors, well, I have to talk about Marconi. It's Marconi Institute for Creativity, and this is a conference about telecommunications. So First of all, Marconi in 1894 was playing with his, simple things. Was reading Elettricità, so it was a magazine, but a tutorial magazine, carrying results from the real scientific literature, which he did not read. He did not finish high school and never entered the University of Bologna, rejected him. So I have to proudly say that he did not get the degree from the University of Bologna, went to speak with Volta about his ideas, and Volta said, "Kid, take a degree and then we'll speak." Okay, so you're a high school student, what do you want from me? So totally at the margin of society, super young, still convinced that he could invent something important, since he was an adolescent. So another message, determination, self-efficacy, persistency, believing in yourself, all of these elements are part of the creativity game. Okay, so then he crosses the Celestini's Hill, and then starts to go further and further, crosses the channel between England and France, and then he has this dream. Let's cross the Atlantic. Of course, the mathematicians and physicists of the time proved mathematically it was impossible to cross the Atlantic with this kind of transmission. The waves would be dispersed in space. Marconi thought, but it was a mistake, that the discontinuity between water and air would guide the waves. That was wrong. Still believed in that idea. Of course, he was using very wide spectrum. It was only him in the world. No problems of frequency reuse at all. And he wants to build this experiment between Cornwall and Newfoundland in Canada. And if you want to go to Canada, I lived in Canada, so I can tell you by experience, you normally wouldn't want to go in the winter. But he does this experiment in December. Because it's very stubborn. December. 12th of December. Strong winds, very cold. The antennas were hundreds of meters high because he was using very low frequencies. So the antennas collapsed. Winter. What does he do? Does he give up? No. Self-efficacy, persistency. The antennas go up with kites. So the first transatlantic transmission, the link budget is closed with antennas which are suspended on kites. That's how strongly he believed. Gets the E, 3 dots, very simple message, beside all the lightning that was catching up from the Atlantic Ocean. And the news go out. Of course, at the time, we already had cables. Copper cables that Franco loved so much. We already had underwater copper cables, 4 of them, connecting England, Europe, and America. And of course, this is competition. But these guys are already rich, and therefore they control the press. So what is the news that come out? The news is wireless signals across the ocean. Well, it looks great. Marconi says he received them from England, but it was just a pre-arranged letter repeated at intervals. So, of course, he is lying. Okay, so this is the kind of press that comes out. When you have a great idea, the reaction is always negative. You have to expect and be ready for negative reaction. Experts do not like to be surprised. Experts know everything. Experts are like guardians of a cemetery. They don't like any tomb to open up. They know where everybody rests. What does Marconi do in response to that? Launches a commercial service. I'm making business out of it, so now tell me it's not true. And the first message of this commercial service is exchange between King Edward and the Pope. So that in 2 hours, all of the world gets to know about it. So, self-efficacy, persistency, marketing, branding, entrepreneurial spirit, all together in this man that at this age had 27 years. 27 years old. Okay, so that's what we learned from Marconi. Only a few minutes left. Let's go back a long time. 500 years before Christ. Let's look at Heraclitus. He's considered to be the first writer in creativity in the history of at least the Western world. He left epigrams, and most of them are very important for us. First one, expect the unexpected or you won't see it. Because our perception and our first processing of perception is based on the model of the world that we have, and we only work on the delta. Like delta coding for source coding, exactly the same. We have a model for the world, we only work on the delta. This is how we save energy in the brain. That means that if you don't expect something, it's out of the model of the world, it will be filtered out. Now, you don't believe me and you're hungry, so let's play a little exercise. Something unexpected, something great will happen here, so let's start looking at this. Focus your attention and try to detect this unexpected event that will surprise you. Okay, so scene goes on. Keep watching closely. You won't believe what happens. Maybe we can give some voice to this.
Will the 17-inch black alloy wheels stop passers-by in their tracks? Will the angular headlights attract the attention of other road users? Will a crowd gather to check out its fresh and sporty look?
Do you think that nothing is happening?
Well, not quite. But did the attention-stealing design distract you from noticing that the entire street has been changing right before your very eyes?
The entire street has been changing.
Have another look. Did you spot the van changing to a taxi? How about the scooter changing to a pair of bicycles? Or the lady holding a pig? Let alone the fact that the entire street is now completely different. Didn't think so.
Okay, so the thing is, we only perceive a small part of the reality, the one that we are expecting. Of course, I fooled you by saying, expect something great. So you were looking at the foreground, but everything was changing in the background. So you're expecting the next great product to be on the market, and then you will be maybe not the pioneer, the second, but the entire background of your market segment is changing right before your eyes, and you still don't see it. You feel the danger of that. Second epigram from Heraclitus. Knowledge is great. As I said in the start, I would be crazy. I'm a professor. Come on. Knowledge is important. Still, that is just the ingredients. That doesn't give you the insight. Insight is something else. It builds on knowledge, takes facts, takes knowledge, and produces something else. We always feel that everything has been discovered. And more or less now, this is it, and there are a few things that we have to do. You don't believe me? Okay, let's look at Lord Kelvin, the Kelvin temperature scale. We love him. He was the best physicist in the world. Year 1900, he says, physics is over. We discovered everything. What is left is little measurements. Let's improve our methodologies for measurements. 5 years later, Einstein comes in with a special theory of creativity. Okay, so, and there are many examples of this, of course. You're saying, well, that happened to them, it will not happen to me. So let's do another real-time experiment right now. Let's read together. According to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in the word are. The only important thing is that the first and the last letter be at the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. And we are all able to do that. And it's a fantastic shortcut. You know how much energy we save by reading and perceiving reality in this way. Fantastic. Still there's a but here. But. That means that we are taking reality and centering it on whatever we already know. We're taking things which are very different from our knowledge and center it back to our knowledge. For example, take any of these strange collections of letters. Take Parbelm. Parbelm might not be just a misspelling of problem. It might be a new concept carrying new implications. But I'm centering that onto what I already know, and I discard all the possible differences. So reality is changing in front of us. It's giving us opportunities for new thinking, and we're still recentering all the time, all day, back to what we already know. And by doing that, we filter out all the possibilities for change. Third epigram by Heraclitus. We look at space. We've talked about satellite communications, maybe no space exploration, but still, it's one of the dreams is to explore our universe. And Heraclitus, back in 500 years before Christ, was saying a very important thing. The sun is great. Could we say, that the sun is not important? It would be totally crazy. No, it would be. Without the sun, there's no planetary system, there's no life. Still, if you want to see the other stars, you have to wait for the sun to set. You have to point your telescope not at the sun, but at the opposite side of the sun. Maybe you put it on a satellite and you create an eclipse between the sun and the satellite, putting the moon in between. That is the time in which your telescope will allow you to really go deep in the universe and really perceive at the end. This is what we need to do in our brain. This is exactly what we need to do in our brain. Dominant ideas, best practices, knowledge, the state of knowledge of the human species today is great, fantastic. You would be crazy to say it's not important. Still, if you want to find alternative ideas, for that 1% of your week, you take those dominant ideas and you turn them off. This is why inhibition is so important in the creative thinking process. Binet, French psychologist at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, said, intelligence is our ability to inhibit the instinct, and today we can say creativity is our ability to inhibit intelligence. You have to go beyond the brilliant, fast, correct answer to look for the slow alternatives, which might be actually in the end, a posteriori, have more value. So you're still getting very, very hungry, and now it's 12:30, so I should stop. But I have one more exercise for you, which only take 2 minutes, so Michele would forgive me. The exercise for you is now to look at two teams of girls passing a basketball. One team is dressed in white, the other team is dressed in black. Let me move this a little ahead. And you have to count how many times the white players pass the ball. So before lunch, you're all tired and you wish that I ended my talk, but still a little exercise for you. Count how many times the white pass the ball, okay? So let's go. 2 teams, 2 balls. It's not difficult. White passing balls. Okay, so let's build the Gaussian. How many of you counted 13? 17. Wait. Let's build the Gaussian. 13. No one. 14. No one. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. And some of you did not count or don't want to raise your hand because it's you're so hungry now that you cannot even raise a hand. Okay, so the correct answer is 16. How many of you saw the gorilla? Okay, so it's about half, which is normal. How many of you saw that one of the black girls left and the curtain in the back changed color? Nobody. So you don't believe me, of course. So let's see it again. Oops. Let's see it again. Did you spot the gorilla?
For people who haven't seen or heard about it, like this before,
And you were in the average.
If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color for the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
Okay, so this is called the monkey business illusion. But the message is, if you didn't see it, it's just because we're performing a different task very efficiently. And for the purpose of exchanging and counting the number of times the ball was passed in the white team, the gorilla, the black girl, the curtain, all of these details are negligible. They are not in the task. So while we are very focused on our task, while we're very focused on our knowledge, it's good that we filter out all of the rest. But still, we realize that there are so many opportunities out there which can be seen once you inhibit the dominant idea, which in this case was the white team. Final epigram is the following. Maybe you think that you had an idea. Most of our new ideas are never born in the sense that we don't represent them to the outside world. They rest inside ourselves. They're killed by ourselves because we don't see the value. It's difficult to see the value. But you see, it really depends. It depends on the environment. It depends on time. It depends on space. It depends on people. The value changes according to the point of view that you take on that idea. So the ability is to change perspective until you find the value of your idea. And there's not a single value anywhere. There's a form of development of life which is called exaptation, which is complementary to adaptation. Exaptation is finding a new function for something that already exists. For example, you've heard about Corning. Corning Glass was producing glass in the state of New York. Just glass, very normal, very traditional glass. But then 1970s come up, somebody invents optical fiber, and it happens that they have all the right technology to produce the optical fiber, and they become the incumbent, essentially. So exaptation means taking a new perspective on a technology that you already have. This is zero-cost R&D. It means take your product portfolio or service portfolio and think of different applications of the same technology. Zero cost, zero risk R&D. All of this is the final slide. All of this is within a framework which goes much beyond our psychosocial reality. It actually pertains to the entire universe. As Whitehead was saying, creativity is actually the ultimate metaphysical principle. Why? Because what is our reality in the end? And by our reality, I really mean the universe. Multitude of elements brought together in unity of experience through something that must be considered a creative act. Because every time instant is different from the previous one, every time instant is original and effective, and we just have to live in that time instant. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope there are some questions. I don't know if we have time for questions, but normally
quick question and quick answer. One, two.
No, one is too little. I came all the way from Bologna.
Thank you. My name is Dan Lowe, and I'm coming from the United States, Kansas State University.
Okay.
I have one question. Does creativity require knowledge? So for example, a student come to you.
Absolutely, yes.
Give you the idea about whatever. And then with the knowledge you have, you're experts, and you think it's nearly impossible to get that going. So what is the best way to respond to that student? Thank you.
Okay. So knowledge brings the ingredients to our process, and we essentially, in the story of our evolution, create all possible combinations of these elements so that our culture grows exponentially. Culture grows exponentially not because of our technology, what we're talking about here today. It has been growing exponentially since the start. If you count the number of stone tools found by archaeologists around the world, dated back from 2.1 million years to today, you see exponential growth of stone tools built by pre-Homo sapiens hominids. Knowledge, culture grows exponentially because we combine previous knowledge into new ideas. So knowledge is essential. Yes, those are the ingredients. Then, knowledge also is a double-edged sword, because that can also be the way in which you kill the new ideas, because if you recenter all the new ideas back to what you know, or if you use your knowledge to say, that has been done before, I'm the expert, you don't go, okay? So it can also be used to kill it. But yes, it's necessary, and it must be used wisely if you want. So, okay.
Can you share the slides?
Share the slides.
Yes, share the slides,
I will
please.
send it to Michele, and then Michele will...
If we are authorized, we will upload the slides, and also we are recording. Can also upload the,
so with a
the
little,
video. And I take advantage because we already uploaded the slides of keynote speeches of yesterday and the welcome address.
Okay, but
Is
let's
there
see. Any other question? Come on.
Any other
Only
question?
one question is not enough. Wait.
Okay.
There's another question here. Come on.
I have.
Don't be so hungry. Come on.
It's not actually questions. The presentation was really great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Very inspiring presentation. However, I have one comment about creativity.
Yes.
I believe if the creativity is the future of human, there is no future for human, because not all are capable of creativity. That's the point.
So, what you're saying is very important. Is creativity something that a few people have and the others don't? Or is it something that we all have? We all had, for sure, when we were young children, a lot of imagination, but little knowledge, so few results. And if it's an ability that we all have, can we transform it into a discipline and then teach it and develop it? And our belief is that, yes, it is a discipline. We can explain it very simply, and then everyone immediately improves. So we have empirical facts to support the fact that everyone can be creative. Of course, that doesn't take away talent. There is talent, like for any other discipline. But it can be developed, so don't worry. We still have a role. Yes, please.
You position the notion of universal salary and creativity as sort of mutually exclusive scenarios, but could you conceive both at the same time and say, I mean, in one case you have universal salary, you don't work, you don't do anything, but you could have both, right? You could do creativity and still have universal salary and leverage the intelligence of the machines to sort of help you in that process.
It's true. So creativity could be just an entertainment activity, it could be arts. It's true. I'm not sure that happiness will follow that model. I'm not sure that happiness can exist without, but I might be wrong, of course. It's a long discussion. What I'm saying is that it's possible to feel well, to conjugate wellness and productivity through a creative state of mind, in which you have organic collaboration between these networks and still be effective by producing ideas that produce value. Not outside of the job market, but inside of that. So I think that model works better for the future of our species. But that's just an opinion, of course. Okay, so I think I have to let you go and eat.
I thank you, Giovanni, very much for this interesting presentation, although now I'm a little bit worried, because I believe that one prerequisite for creativity is memory, and I don't have memory because I forgot in introducing him to say you that he is the president of Cineca, which is the biggest university consortium. And then I'm worried also because I may not have one part of the brain. Because last night I was awake for 2 hours, from 3 to 5, but I didn't get any idea to solve any problem. Maybe I don't have a part of the brain, or I have, but it doesn't work. I don't know.
Okay, with that note, that sad note.
But anyway, thank you very much, and I take advantage also for saying something else. Yesterday I mentioned to you that Guglielmo Marconi is also linked to our university. Of course, Guglielmo Marconi was born in Bologna, and there, in that area, carried out most of his research activities, but our university is linked to Guglielmo Marconi because in Villa Mondragone, where this evening we will enjoy, I hope, a pleasant evening, he performed some experiments. He performed the experiments to connect Villa Mondragone with Vatican City, because the Pope asked him to create a secure connection. The Pope was worried because he thought that someone listened his conversations. So he committed Marconi to create a secure link. Not from there, actually, but for the summer residents that you will see during the tour before reaching Villa Mondragone. And this is the occasion to, just for the maybe last advertisement, now we start lunch after dedicating 5 minutes for some...
the awards.
Yes. And, but this afternoon we have to leave, you have to leave for the tour at 4 p.m. sharp. So I ask session chair to do the impossible to end the sessions at 3:45. Then from here we will reach the bus stop where we will have a private bus that will pick you up, and the tour will start, so that you can stay at Villa Mondragone at 6:30, where you will enjoy a tour of the villa, and then a pleasant event, and then dinner. Before going to lunch, 2 minutes, I am proud to deliver to Giovanni this certificate of appreciation. Okay. Thank you. Okay, and and we are sad that 2 colleagues cannot stay this evening with us. So Maria Angles Vasquez Castro, where is her? Please. Oh, what? I have to deliver this certificate. You leave, you must leave. This is for you. No worry. Okay. Please. The photograph. And Simon Pietro Romano. Okay, come. He is also busy with some familiar commitment. So, thank you very much for your contribution to the conference. And Marco Di Genova is here, but okay, I can do it.